Hola, hola, amiga. Today on the show, we welcome Rocio Garza, otherwise known as Rocio Isabel. Rocio is a prominent voice in the bilingual lifestyle community, known for her influential presence as a blogger and YouTuber under the brand Rocio Isabel, formerly known as Risas Rizos. Since 2014, she has passionately shared her expertise, offering valuable insights into achieving healthy curly hair, discovering the latest beauty trends, and expressing her love for fresh and sophisticated fashion. With 5 years of marriage behind her and 2 children to nurture, Rocio warmly extends an invitation to her audience, offering candid insights into the joys and trials of parenthood, the ebbs and flows of marriage and relationships, prioritizing self care amidst life's demands, and gracefully navigating the delicate balance of it all. Beyond her dedicated focus on lifestyle, curls, and mommyhood, Rocio cherishes life's little extras, believing that everything else is lagniappe. Y'all, I Googled what this was. At first, I read lagniappe because I have no idea about like French, Creole language. Sorry, Rocio, if I'm offending you. And sorry to the listeners who are from Louisiana and New Orleans specifically. But this is just me being in my own little bubble in Chicago. So this is a reminder that I have to travel some more. And so, anyway, in this Viva la Mami Spotlight episode, Rocio shares her journey about being a content creator and how she pivoted from beauty content creation into more meaningful discussions about motherhood, especially as a Latina mom raising multicultural children. We delve into her experiences during the pandemic, her traumatic first childbirth experience, and the importance of mental health, especially within the Latinx community. Rocio emphasizes on the necessity of embracing cultural heritage of raising biracial and bilingual children. And finally, she highlights the significance of community support and breaking generational traumas while maintaining authenticity in her content. So I had a lovely conversation with her, and I hope that you get to listen through the entirety of this episode. As a Viva la Mami Spotlight episode, it's an opportunity to welcome Latina moms on the podcast so that way they can share their stories and their unique experiences. So that way we don't feel alone in our own journeys, because I'm pretty sure if you listen to the story, you will definitely resonate in some level or in some capacity. So without further ado, here is my interview with Rocio Garza, otherwise known as Rocio Isabel. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of 2 on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in 2 identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Rocio. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for being here. I am just very honored to have connected with you at the Mom 2.0 Summit this past spring in Nashville.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a nice reunion, but it was also a great opportunity to meet other moms and especially other Latina moms. That was probably one of the highlights of the trip for me.
Yes, same. And to be honest, when we had that access of connecting with folks on the Mom 2.0 app, I was like kind of looking for Latinas. I'm like, by last name, first name.
Yeah.
That was kind of like what brought my interest in knowing that there's a lot of Latina moms who are out there, whether they're content creators or business owners, right? Like, I think all of us have that ability to share who we are and how we go about with our life, really, and not to ignore our lived experiences as not just mamas, but also as Latinas as well. And so the information you share is very inspiring, but also it's relatable as well for many mamas who are Latinas, who are working moms, and also who are raising multicultural children as well. And so this will kind of be our conversation for the most part, raising multicultural children, just because oftentimes people put Latinos in this bucket and
Mhm.
people generalize, people categorize us where it's like, no, we are a diaspora, really. And it's not just of Latinos, it's of many different cultures and languages, even itself. And so I'm really thrilled to have you here because I think that your motherhood story is really important to tell and amplify. And so, yeah, I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. Me too.
Yes. And so before we delve into that, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. So if you can tell them a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Rocio, and I was actually born in Baltimore, but I was raised in New Orleans. I moved to New Orleans, I believe, when I was around 2. So New Orleans is really everything that I've known as far as growing up in a place that's magical. I don't know if you've been to New Orleans. I don't remember if that's something that we had talked about at Mom
Yes.
too, but New Orleans is a very special place, and it's just a part of me. And so I actually live in Baton Rouge now, and it's quite different from New Orleans. New Orleans is it's a city in itself that just is filled with so much culture and diversity, and there's so much celebration, and you have a variety of people and backgrounds, and there's so much history. And Baton Rouge is just the capital of Louisiana, and it's not as I don't want to say culturally diverse, but there's just not as much action happening in Baton Rouge as there is in New Orleans. And so I've lived in New Orleans almost my whole life. I come from a very large, loud and proud Latino family. My mother is Honduran and my dad is Mexican. And I celebrate that and being a New Orleanian. So I don't know if that's maybe something that will come up later in conversation as far as like my kids that I'm raising, but I celebrate not just being a Latina, but also being a New Orleanian. And so I try to do that even here with where I live in Baton Rouge. I fell into content creation by accident. I lost my curls. So I have naturally curly hair, and I lost my curls to heat damage. Growing up, having curly hair wasn't considered the European standard of beauty. It wasn't something that was seen as like pretty type of hair. So I would straighten it and feel prettier and feel like I fit in. And then when I actually lost my curls to heat damage from just straightening it all of the time, I really missed it. I felt like it was a part of me. It was not to say like my signature part of my physical appearance, but it was something that once you lose it, you miss it. So I did everything possible to get my curls back. And then as they came back healthier than my curls were before, I had friends and family members asking me what I did to get my curls back healthier than before. And I tried to tell them and tried to explain what products I was using until finally a friend of mine was like, well, just do a video. Just show me a video step by step of everything that you're using and how you're using it. And just show me. So I did that. I filmed a video. I put it on YouTube. And I noticed, those friends and family members that were commenting and being supportive. And then I noticed I would get questions by way of comments from people that I didn't recognize, their profile names I didn't recognize. So I figured it was my family member recreating accounts to make me feel better. And they're like, no, Rocio, we don't have time for you like that. And so I realized that it was coming from people that I didn't know, but they actually had questions that I had the answers to based off of my personal experience. So I created a beauty channel that was primarily centered around naturally curly hair and how to get your hair healthier than before and really love and embrace your curls. In creating that content and those videos on YouTube, I also stumbled, or I would say some subscribers had stumbled upon the fact that I am Latina, and they started to ask for content in Spanish so that their primas in other countries can watch it. And so I was like, okay, well, let me do that. And I knew that my Spanish wasn't perfect. And I was very nervous to start creating content in Spanish, but I knew that there was a space that needed to be filled with more videos in Spanish that had to do with this topic and the subject. So I started creating content in Spanish, and my channel just kind of grew from there. And I was able to do this full time. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being part of a community, and not only a community that was focused on loving and wanting to love and embrace their hair, but also just, I don't know if you can agree with me or not, but just like at Mom Too, right? When you're craving that sense of community with other Latinas, or in that sense, it was other Latina moms. For the YouTube world, it was also a sense of wanting to connect with other Latinas online, by way of YouTube or by way of Instagram, or, at these conferences, or even just hosting meetups and events for me to be able to meet my subscribers and those who wanted to connect, in the online space. So I really enjoy doing that. I have done that for, I want to say, almost 10 years now is what it feels like. And then I became a mom. And when I became a mom, I very quickly felt the need to shift in my brand. I wanted to rebrand because I felt like I wanted to do more than just talk about beauty. And while I really enjoyed the platform that I had to encourage other women, especially Latinas, to love and embrace their curls, a lot of the beauty content that I was seeing felt very superficial. And in finding out that I was going to be raising a girl, I wanted to have a platform that showed her that mommy is more than just her hair, or mommy is more than just, her skin or her makeup or the outside appearances. And I also wanted to connect with my audience on a deeper level by way of sharing my experiences as a new mom. I had noticed, and maybe it's just the way the algorithm was working at the time for me personally, but I just wasn't receiving a lot of content from moms that were really keeping it real. And when I say keeping it real, I mean like more of the mental struggle, I guess, that I was going through, because I did have my first child in the midst of the pandemic. And there was a lot that I felt like I wanted to talk about, but I was almost afraid to share my experience because nobody else that I was aware of was sharing it, or not enough people were really talking about it. So I made the leap, and little by little was just sharing tidbits of my pregnancy here and the delivery there and postpartum here, and a little bit at a time. And I found that I really was able to connect with my audience on a much deeper level than just the surface of, oh, well, what products are you using on your hair today? And what deep conditioner are you planning on trying out this week? So that's a little bit of my story in a nutshell, and how I ended up here, and what I'm passionate about.
I just love how you allowed yourself permission to pivot, within your own business. And I think that is the beauty of being an entrepreneur, right? Where you start out with a specific kind of brand, but then you shift to something else because you are in a new season of life, right? You are in a new chapter. And that's what makes you relatable to many folks. Even like the same followers that you've had during your journey in providing beauty products, reviews, tips, and everything, like how then you transitioned over to being a mom. I'm pretty sure that many of those followers were still remaining, with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that actually really surprises me is whenever, let's say I'll share something that we're going through in our motherhood journey with my toddler, and I'll have somebody say, "Oh, thank you so much for sharing. By the way, I've been following you. Like, I'm an OG follower from whenever you were posting on Risa Rizos, like I don't know, 7 years ago or so. And it blows my mind, number one, that anybody would want to stick around for that long because I don't think that I'm a very interesting person. I find
You
myself
are.
kind of boring sometimes. My kids would think otherwise, but I'll take their answer more than anything. But yeah, it surprises me that I guess people want to stick around. And I think it's still really encouraging for me to continue to share these stories that sometimes I don't, not that I don't want to share them, but I'm like, is this too much? Or is this, should I keep this to myself? I don't
Mm,
know.
I know it's that battle, but
Mhm.
what you have been providing, I think it's great. And so
Thank you.
it's not just like inspirational, but it's informative also, and you speak the truth as well. And I think in this aspect of social media, where oftentimes we get very influenced, especially as mamas, as millennial modern moms, for the most part, like I feel we get very influenced, and then it ends up in this sense of doubt where we wonder, like, oh, am I doing enough, am I not,
Mhm.
am I doing a bad job because I'm not putting my kid out into these different activities. And so, like, even in the summer where you provided different tips about how to literally keep your kids involved at home, where you don't have to spend thousands of dollars so that you can get your kids involved in the summer, I
Mhm.
even with that, like, I thought that was such a creative way.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for that.
No, thank you. That means a lot to hear from anybody. Just to feel that, okay, I'm not just putting it out there and nobody's listening. Hopefully it's able to help somebody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you are a mommy of two
I
girls,
am.
right? Yes. And so can you share us your motherhood story? How did you navigate it, as far as with being a mom in the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually moved to Baton Rouge a year before I had my first daughter, Penelope. I moved in with my, at the time, boyfriend, who I don't know if I had mentioned this earlier, but I had focused on hair and beauty, and that was it. I didn't really share too much of my personal life, like dating or anything like that, until I had started to date my now husband. And I moved in, and what, like 7 or 8 months later, I got pregnant, and we were like, okay, we're doing this. We're gonna have a baby. And what I we got married after 5 months, and then the world shut down. So
Mhm.
when I moved to Baton Rouge, it's something that I never really saw myself doing because, again, New Orleans was my life, right? And Baton Rouge was an hour and a half away from my family. So I come from, again, a very large family, very involved, very just anything that you need, we will be there to help. But I moved an hour and a half away. So I'm not as easily accessible when it comes to the need, for help. When I got pregnant, and then of course with the planning of the wedding and everything, everybody was very involved and very helpful and very hands on. But then when the world shut down, it was a matter of nobody knew what was happening. Everybody was just kind of like keeping to their spaces, and so I really experienced the second half of my pregnancy in isolation with my husband and just trying to figure it out. And I'm sure that even if I had family here in Baton Rouge with us, the anxiety would probably still be there because of the unknown. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew, it was literally when the world had started to shut down. And then they had all these protocols in place at the hospital saying, well, your husband isn't allowed to come to your appointments anymore, and your husband isn't even allowed to come to your delivery, and your family isn't allowed to come, and all this. And so my birth plan went completely partially out of the window because I really expected my husband to be there and my mother, because my mother is my rock, my mother is my best friend, and I had always envisioned her being there for the delivery of my child.
Mm.
And all that went out of the window. So I had a lot of anxiety um, in my first pregnancy, and I when it was time for me to have the baby, the protocol that was in place at the hospital, they had allowed Lance to be there, but I think there was this rule that was like will it happen? Won't it happen? Are they going to enforce it? Maybe they'll let it slide. But the rule was if the mother was tested positive for COVID, then she would have to isolate from her baby. And I remember just being so fearful, but like wanting to be around my family because I needed that support, but being so fearful that like maybe if they got COVID, from being out and about or doing whatever they were doing, that I was going to get COVID and I was going to test positive, and then they would have to take the baby from me. So it was just, there were a lot of what ifs that were just flying around my head. And what ultimately happened, or wound up happening, was my parents drove up and they met me at not they met me, but when we got to the hospital, they said goodbye to me at the entrance because they weren't allowed in. And that was probably one of the harder parts of my labor, is
Mm.
knowing that, okay, I won't have that bit of support. And I just have my husband. And not that that was a bad thing or anything, but it's just, again, we have this idea of what we wanted in our mind.
Right.
The the delivery itself, had planned to have her naturally, wound up getting the epidural, I want to say around 6 centimeters. I gave in, and I pushed for 2 hours,
Oh
and
my
she got
gosh.
wedged in there. Yeah. Oh, girl.
Oh,
I think I'm just getting over the trauma of it. She was wedged in there, and they said her heartbeat was dropping, and we had to make the decision to do the C-section. We did the emergency C-section, and long story short, without getting too much into it, because I don't know if I'm like all the way healed of the trauma yet, but I thought I was gonna die. And in that moment, when they got Penelope out, was probably the only time in my life that I ever felt like, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but willing to let go,
mm,
knowing that if my baby is okay, then nothing else matters in
mm,
that moment. So she wound up being fine. I wound up being okay. Postpartum was really hard for me. My idea was to nurse Penelope as long as I could. My breastfeeding journey was not what I thought it was going to be. It was very hard. I had experienced postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage. I had
mm.
only heard of postpartum depression, but I wasn't aware of all the other
Yep.
um, all the other experiences you could have in your postpartum journey. I wasn't fully aware of what needed to get done in order for me to have a successful breastfeeding journey. I really went into it, I don't want to say blind. I did my research, but on my own. But I
Mm.
just wish more people would have talked to me about it, especially in regards to mental health.
Yeah.
And that really affected me as a mom, as a new mom. I really put a lot of guilt on why the delivery happened the way that it did. I put that guilt on myself.
Mm.
And I carried that for a good while. And then raising my first child was great. My husband is Caucasian and I am Latina. And I'm really, really big on wanting to share that experience with her and share my culture with her. And so there was just a lot of just newness that was happening, with the first. And then eventually my husband and I are like, well, let's do it again. So we tried and we succeeded. And I went into my pregnancy. It was like night and day, night
Mm.
and day. There was so much trauma behind the first and so much anxiety with the first. And with my second, with River, it was a much more peaceful pregnancy. The delivery, I had planned for it to be a VBAC, and I
Mm.
wasn't informed until 7 months pregnant that I wasn't eligible for a VBAC, I guess, because of the way the incision was done with the first. And so
Oh.
um, I didn't meet my my OB until a week before I had River, because we had been planning for a VBAC the whole time. So I was meeting with midwives, for all of my appointments, and it wasn't until the last week before, and I expressed my concerns and my trauma and my fears, and she ensured that we would have a healing delivery.
Mm.
And that is exactly what I had. And my goal was to have a successful breastfeeding journey again. I guess, yeah, I wanted to apply all the things I learned, not just by way of research, but also by way of talking to other moms.
Yeah.
And I applied everything with my second. And I feel like it has been very healing. Like it has really brought a sense of confidence as a
Mhm.
mom now. Whereas with the first, I was like, what am I doing? Please, somebody help me. And this time I really feel like, I don't want to say that I've got it figured out, but I just feel more confident that even if I make a mistake, that I know I'm going to get through it.
Isn't that interesting? And I think people don't talk about their experiences
Mhm.
as often as you think, especially when we were in this pandemic world. We were all isolated, and and many of us who experience like pregnancy, childbirth, or being moms for the first time, it's almost like we think that everything is going to be fine. It's all bliss. It's all going to be, rainbows and butterflies, and really until something happens, really, that's when you're like, oh, I guess it's my turn in a way. And we really don't know how to navigate that because either we don't have the necessary tools, the right people in our circles, because perhaps they never talked about it and going through different experiences, right? Like I always thought that, for example, if a woman has a C-section, they don't get to have the discharge that you do after delivery. Like I know that that is so ignorant of me, but again, even with that little example,
But
we
it's
don't talk
not.
about our
Yeah.
bodies. We
Right.
don't, yeah, and especially as Latinas in the Latino community, we just do not talk
We don't
about
talk about it.
nothing until it happens, and then someo's like, "Oh yeah,
Oh,
sí, me pasó
yeah,
eso,"
exactly. Oh, God. Do you know how
and I'm like,
frustrating
"Why
that
didn't you
was?
tell me?"
Oh, yeah, a mí me pasó eso. I'm like, okay, why didn't you warn me?
Right, exactly, because that makes you feel even more isolated, and it can be very frustrating, especially in our community, porque I'm like, "Okay,
Mm.
you knew that I was going through this, like, you probably anticipated this, and you literally left me, like, alone in a way
Yep.
in this experience." And so, it's it's interesting, but I am so glad that you learned how to heal with your second one. I think sometimes we got to give ourselves a second chance
Yeah.
to really live through just like the nuances and how unique our experiences can be, even from the first to the second.
And there are still hiccups, with my second go round. I can't
Yeah.
say that I don't experience any maybe negative feelings of postpartum or anything like that. I mean, it's still hard. It's double hard now. But I guess I I feel more comfortable sharing. Whereas with my first, I didn't talk about the postpartum depression. I didn't talk about the postpartum. I sure as hell didn't talk about postpartum rage because that was embarrassing for me. Like, oh my God, I don't want people to think that I'm capable of rage. And while this time around I didn't have postpartum rage, or I maybe I had a little bit of postpartum depression, I don't know, but I did experience kind of like a breakdown, like an emotional and mental breakdown that was just also riddled with exhaustion,
Mhm.
to the point where I had to bring myself, like I drove myself to the hospital because I knew I needed help.
Hmm.
And I think that's the difference between the mom now versus the mom I was with with my first pregnancy or with my first baby, because I, at the time, probably would have been feeling all those emotions and would have just suffered in silence and just made it worse. And
Mm.
that's so scary, not just for me, but for my baby, you know? And this time around, I felt like I was picking up on the signs and really felt in tune with my body and understood that, okay, I need help. I need to, for the better of my child and me, I need to go find help. And
Mm.
and I did. And I think my experience having gone to the hospital, I I shared it with my audience, and I was really scared, but I prayed on it, and I just thought, like, I can't be the only one going through this. And if just one person can relate, or if even just one person is struggling in silence and finds this video and gets help in whatever way she needs help, then I know that the video was done okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really shocked to see how many messages, like not just comments, but I noticed that in the more personal videos, the ones that you're really raw and honest, there are less comments and more messages in the DMs, because
Mhm.
they still don't feel comfortable sharing in a public space, but they will still want to connect. And I
Yeah.
think that speaks volumes with how we as content creators are using our platforms, because I guess whereas before where it all was, again, superficial and like the
Mm.
makeup and the hair and stuff, it was all about the numbers. It was all about like growing on social media and getting the numbers and working with brands and this that, and like for me now it's like I just want to make sure that my girls are cool, you know, like that my girls are good, that the other moms that are watching, that they're in a good headspace, and that they are good in their heart, and that they
Yeah.
know that they're doing a good job, that they know that they're doing the best job that they can as a mom, not just for their baby, but for themselves as well.
Authenticity matters, especially in our community as well. Because, yeah, sometimes we feel very uncomfortable sharing what we go through.
Mhm.
Mental health is still a taboo for a lot of people in our community. And by you sharing your experience, I think not only does it matter because you are empowering others to feel like they shouldn't ignore these experiences and do something out of it, but you're also helping others amplify their voices as well to then think like, oh, I should also speak up. I should also
Exactly.
seek help, you know? And so I think yeah, it's so important to be genuine and authentic, especially when you are in that level of capacity as a content creator. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing us that experience. Hope it didn't bring any triggers.
No, no, no triggers at all. I think the more I talk about it,
Yeah.
the more it comes out without me breaking down. So I think I'm okay sharing
Okay.
about it right now. Yeah.
Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. And so you mentioned that you married a Caucasian man and
Mhm.
you're raising biracial, bilingual, bicultural girls. How is that going? And yeah, how do you show up your Latinidad to your girls and also to your husband? How does that look like in your household?
Well, how many times have I already stated that Baton Rouge is so different from New Orleans? So the oh my God, where do I even start? Okay, so New Orleans, as New Orleans has lots of festivals, music festivals, food festivals, just there's always something to do. Baton Rouge is just not giving me the same energy. And so it's really hard to find um places to take my girls to show them the culture of the city that I grew up in.
Mm.
And so there's there's me trying to show them the culture of New Orleans, but also in going to a lot of these festivals, they're also learning about their identity and their culture as young Latinas.
Mm.
Especially for Hispanic Heritage. I'll use Hispanic Heritage Month, for example. There is like a festival or some kind of event going on every weekend in New Orleans. Whereas here in Baton Rouge, I'm asking around, like, is there something going on for Hispanic Heritage Month? And it's like crickets, right?
Huh.
So I feel like it's really up to me to take them to these places or just show them uh, what it is to be Hondureña or Mexicana or to have roots.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's almost hard for me to answer that question because I'm doing my best, man. But I still feel like I'm not doing enough. So some of the things that I have been doing is just keeping their abuelos involved in their lives as much as possible so that they can get more of the language, which sometimes is a little frustrating to me because my parents will talk to them in English. And I would much rather them just speak full Spanish at their house instead of teaching my kids broken English in their house. So, it's I'll take what I can get. But they're learning a little bit, at their own little house, but just
Mhm.
being there and getting a little sense of their heritage through that. We are trying heavily with different foods, but that's really hard because they're both now in the very picky stages of
Mm.
eating. So I think right now the best that I can get them to eat are like quesadillas or pupusas. I think pupusas has been like a winner right now. Um, but music, I think if anything, it's been music that's been really helpful in sharing a little bit of who mommy is and where mommy's background is from.
Yeah.
So by way of like salsa and punta, um, that seems to be like the two that we have playing most around my kids. I love to see them dance. I love to hear them, well, more Penelope requesting certain songs. So like Penelope will request like Tito Puente because it's, there are songs that will play on rotation or she she is also a fan of Selena. And so that
Yeah.
brings a lot of joy to me, to know that my daughter 4-year-old is already asking for Selena. I don't think that I really thought about thank you for asking the question
Sure.
because before, again, I felt like I was just doing what I could, but also feeling like I wasn't doing enough. But I think I'm also putting it into perspective in my mind as I'm sharing this, that in knowing that I married a man that is not Latino, maybe before I didn't think it would be this hard to share these cultural experiences with my own children.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's hard just because of where I live or if it's hard because of, the dynamic of our family, or if it's hard maybe just because I'm not doing enough. I don't know. So I think you gave me a lot to think about with that question because I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's totally valid,
Mhm.
especially with being in an area that isn't culturally diverse. And to be honest, I guess this is just the Midwesterner and Chicagoan of me. We tend to be in our own little bubble.
Mhm.
But when you think of Louisiana overall, you don't think of Latinos living there.
Correct.
And so when you said that, oh, I'm from New Orleans, I'm like, Latinos live there?
Oh, yes, girl, they do. Oh my God, they do. You're gonna find Latinos of all places in New Orleans.
Because
You're gonna find
and
Hondureño, Mexicano, Dominicano, Puerto Riqueño, like
really,
Cubano, everything. There is a melting pot of it's so culturally diverse. It's
that's awesome.
beautiful. I love it. There's no place like it. But here in Baton Rouge, you just don't get it. But I do find myself like, okay, so for example, if we'll get books, like let's say we'll go to the library, we'll get some new books. I always make sure that they come home with a book that is in Spanish so
Mm,
that they read in Spanish. They hear stories that are in Spanish. So Lil Libros are a huge hit. We love Lil Libros here. They are getting into Loteria.
okay.
So we had the Lil Loteria, but I think Penelope, what was it? I think it was for Thanksgiving or anytime that our family gets together, sometimes we'll play like different games and stuff. So we played like actual Loteria and
Yeah.
she wanted to play. So like all the little cousins they were playing and she's like, Loteria. So it's just like, oh, or if they'll, shout out something like La Sirena. Oh, I have La Sirena. So, she'll recognize certain words and I love that for her. Um,
Yeah.
so by way of books, different activities like that, canticos. I don't know if you're familiar with, right. So we've got canticos also that's something that we'll watch sometimes. And I'm trying to, I feel like my kids are slowly phasing out the Miss Rachel. So we don't watch it as much, but a couple of months ago and like from when River was born, this was, Aprende Peque.
Oh, yes.
Are you
Yes.
familiar? Okay, so Aprende Peque, we were like, that's all we would watch rather than Miss Rachel. With Penelope, when it was just Penelope, we watched Miss Rachel. But then when I found Aprende Peque, I was like, oh my God, this is genius. And she's like the Latina version of Miss Rachel.
Yeah.
So we were listening to that. And so the songs are really fun and they're very catchy. And it's just if I can find more of that, then I will do that more in the house. But I think that
Yeah.
those are wins. Now, as far as my husband, I don't know, man. We're 5 years in, and I'd be lucky if I can get a small conversation with him in Spanish. But no, we haven't gotten there
Yeah.
yet.
And that's fine. And I think it just depends on how much like effort and intentionality you want to have in exposing your girls to their culture. But I honestly, what you already do, I think you're doing a great job. You're not ignoring the fact that they are Latinas. I mean, they're already
No.
immersed, and I'm sure that they can identify themselves as Latinas. And
Mhm.
even though the outside world, like Baton Rouge and the community that they're in, perhaps they're not as exposed as much to it, you at least expose them in their own home, and even with music, books,
Mhm.
like those are so pivotal and so important that I'm pretty sure that they're gonna have this sense of identity,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope so.
they
I'm
do.
trying. Oh, because for me, growing up, I was just surrounded by friends and family, and they were Latinos, and so it's
Yeah.
just like all on, and um, and not all I've known, but it was at the forefront of my identity, and I wanted that for them. So
Right.
I'm trying to convince my family to move up here, and no one's no one's taking the bait yet. So we'll see.
Being that, you are in an area where there isn't much sort of diversity, if you will, have you built a comunidad of parents or mamas who are raising either biracial kids or Latino kids? How does that look like now in your own community?
So in person, physically in Baton Rouge, I have not. I've wanted to.
Mm.
I am just making mom friends, and Penelope just turned 4. Making mom friends just alone is so hard.
Yes.
And I wish more people would talk about that, like how hard it is to make mom friends. But building or being a part of a community of other Latina moms, no, I haven't found that here yet. And I miss it and I crave it. Um I think my soul needs it. So no, I haven't had that experience here. But I am still connecting with other moms online and I feel like that's been my saving grace so
Yeah.
far is just sharing those experiences with other Latina moms online or even just again meeting other Latina moms in person at events that I go to that have to do with content creation, or anything of that sort, that's been fulfilling. And I wish I had more of that for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it is hard to make mom friends. So hard.
I just want them to make friends first. Like I want my kids to make friends, and then like I'll just get whatever then yeah comes from that.
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, thanks for your honesty because it's very easy for like us to make friends in the workplace, right? Or
Mhm.
in school. But now when you're in this different level in your life where your family's your priority or you don't have as much time and dedication to give out
Right.
to other people, like
Mhm.
yeah, it's so hard. It's so difficult.
You also have to like the stars have to align when it
Yeah.
comes to mom friends too. Like you have to
Yeah.
not that these are requirements, but they're definitely helpful. So if your kids are the same age, like that's rare.
Right.
If you are living in the same area, that's rare. And then of course, if you have your same schedules lining up, then you know, when are you going to find all three where your time lines up perfectly, where your kids are around the same age and you live within close proximity? It's
Right.
so rare.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you mentioned though that you have found friends online, and I
Mhm.
think that is totally valid. And it's another way to build connections and to just like it's almost like a pen pal relationship when you
Right,
think
right.
about it.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
little pen pal, little distance buddy.
Yes.
Mhm.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and so what would you say are some tips that you can share to mamas who may feel isolated in an environment where there isn't as much diversity in their community?
One tip that I would give is actually something that I'm trying to work on myself right now. So if you feel like you don't have that sense of community in your area or you feel as though you are isolated in your space, build a community. So where I've built the community online, I'm working my butt off to try to build that community offline, even just in my area. So I don't know if anyone is listening is aware of there are these mommy Facebook groups in nearly every town in the world. It feels like um, if there is a Facebook group for your area, check to see if there is a Facebook group that also targets Latina moms in your area. And if there isn't, then create one. And so that way you guys can have meetups and just and get together and just kind of, relax, just to have a moment to yourselves. But definitely just to try to create a community so that you don't have that sense of isolation. Um,
Mhm.
if it's more of an issue where it is affecting your mental health, then definitely reach out to a professional. There are therapists that are able to help. There are resources by way of the hospitals. If just going and asking to speak with somebody um, like with your OB, see if they have recommendations on who you can speak to if you're having those feelings of isolation, just like wanting somebody to talk to, because there's so much in motherhood um, that we just carry on our backs, and the
Mm.
weight of it, it's just it. You can't function. You can't fully function as a mom if you're carrying all that weight. So just even if it's just dumping all of what you're feeling onto somebody that you don't know by way of a professional, that in itself can be really, really helpful. And I would also just, I don't know if it's a recommendation or a tip, but would just encourage you to also find your community online. If you don't create content, you just want to, scroll through, find moms that you find are relatable, that are sharing um, their motherly stories, and you'll find your story in someone else and
Mm.
you'll feel validated. I think that's something that I crave that so much in that first pregnancy and that first delivery and that those first, few months after having my first baby, I wanted to feel validated. I wanted to feel like, okay, I'm not going crazy. Like I can't be the only mom in the world that's going through these experiences. And then just hearing one person saying, I went through that, God, that feels so validating. And it feels like I'm not crazy. I am a good mom kind of thing. So again, even if you're not creating and you just want to consume content, find other, I don't know if you want to say mommy creators or just anybody in general out there that has a story that is similar to yours. Take a listen and then leave a comment and let them know that you're listening. Let them know that you can relate and let them know that you're going through those same experiences so that they can continue to share those stories and you guys can just kind of like learn from each other. Even if you don't leave a comment on the page and you want to slide in the DMs, again, that's definitely okay. And I'm here to listen too. If somebody wants to share their experience or need somebody to talk to, I'm open to that.
Yes. Oh, I love it. And I think what you suggested are so easy. I wouldn't say easy tips, but these are tips that are doable for a busy mom. It can be as easy as searching on a Facebook group that is, tailored to what you're looking for, whether if it's through your identity or if you're looking for local moms. I think
Mhm.
we have everything to our disposal that is very accessible. And I think it's a matter of us searching and making that little effort in the beginning. But then it's going to be helpful once you do have that community, or once you have that professional support in that case of seeking professional help. So,
Mhm.
yes, very, very helpful tips. And I appreciate that. Especially coming from you, who's experienced it all and especially going through the whole
I'm excited
postpartum.
and all, but I feel like more is coming.
Oh, snaps.
More is coming. Look, I'm raising a 4-year-old going on 14, so I'm feeling it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a three-nager. And so,
It just
oof,
it comes out of nowhere, right?
I
It's
know.
like,
I'm just like,
"Hey there, sweetie," and then it's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, where did the attitude come from?" Yep.
like,
Mhm.
seriously,
Yep.
I just
Oh.
shared a story today and everyone responded back and they were just like, oh my gosh, look at him. He's so funny. Haha. And I'm like, yeah, he
Mhm.
leaves me speechless sometimes. He
Mhm.
basically just tells me to shut up. And I don't even know what to do.
I mean, well, what do you do? That's the thing is like we're healing from how we were raised
Yeah.
as kids, and it's like
You weren't
I
allowed to
was at
say that.
what exactly? I was talking to my therapist about this. I don't know if I can if I don't know if I'm allowed to share. I'm sure I'm allowed to share, but like
Yeah.
I was talking to her about that like I find myself getting triggered by my 4-year-old so often right now, but I don't wanna react the way my parents or specifically my mother had reacted, and so it's like she does certain things or says certain things, like you said, your son was saying, she'll say certain things, and I can immediately hear my mom, but I'm
Yes.
fighting every fiber in my being to not respond to my child the way I was responded to.
Yep. Yep.
But sometimes, man, I'm like, "Oh, girl, you are so lucky.
I
You're so
know.
lucky to have me as your mom." Because look, oh my god, it's a lot. There's
I
so
know.
much. I love
I,
your podcast. I thank
oh, thank
you. Thank you so much for sharing. When I tell you, I okay, so I don't know how much time we have, but like I started listening from the moment that we met at Mom2, and still to this day, one of my favorite episodes was where you were literally talking about just breaking generational curses and like and not so much not making the same mistakes because it's like our moms and our grandmothers they didn't know that what they were doing were mistakes. They didn't that's all they knew,
right.
right? All they knew. And look, I've tried to relay the message to my own mother by way of what I've learned on your podcast, and I'm still working on it. But I just want to thank you for sharing and for having your platform or using your platform to really reach out to other Latina moms because we're a different breed,
Yeah.
and we have
You are.
we have so much inside that just we want to feed into our kids, but in the best way possible. So
Yes. Oh, thank you. I do have one more question. It's my last question. How are you redefining motherhood?
I don't know if this is a good enough answer, but I am taking what I have learned from my mother and my grandmother, and I'm taking my time to process it and how it's affected me and what I want to see differently in the generation to come. So I guess I would say I'm redefining it by way of, I don't know, rewiring the trauma. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like my answer is boring.
No, I think it makes so much sense.
I mean that's the only way I can really think of it. It's like I see it like I can close my eyes and I see it as like an engine that needs rewiring. I don't even know if engines have wires. But just because you want to hold on to what your mother and your grandmother has taught you. Like I think that there's so many beautiful things that have been passed down.
Yeah.
And I want to share all of that with my kids. I come from generations of strong women, strong, resilient women. And I want to share those traits with my kids, but not by way of why they had to be so resilient or why they had to be so strong. They're such strong and resilient women, and I want my kids to be the same, but I don't want it to be because of the why.
I love that answer. And I
Yeah.
can definitely relate because most recently, as you know, my great grandma passed away, mi bisabuela. And let me tell you, this mujer was so resilient. Even to her last breath, she was still holding on. She had to prove the world that she still had to take whatever breaths she had to take to prove people that she was still here, but her body couldn't. And that's just telling how, yes, like we want to hold on to certain traits of our ancestors, especially las mujeres from our family, right? But in a way, I guess it's more so reframing it and showing our girls, especially you, because you're raising two girls, and how you want to manifest those positive aspects of your ancestors, but how are you shifting it into a better version of it? And I think it makes sense. You're like rewiring it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Rocio, you are wonderful. I love your story. I love your purpose. I love your mission. So, where can people follow you if they haven't yet? Because, okay, you are around.
Correct. Okay. All right. So let's see. I would say I'm primarily on Instagram. That's where I live most of my online life. And so you can find me on Instagram at La Rocio Isabel. And I still have the YouTube channel if you still want to love and embrace your curls and you need some curl tips. I'm not as active on YouTube as much because motherhood, and I just don't have the time to dedicate like I did before. But that's still Risas Rizos, RISAS, RIZOS. And yeah, La Rocio Isabel, Instagram, X, Threads, TikTok. And I have a blog, www.rocioisabel.com. And I want to say is that everything? I'm pretty sure that's like all the platforms. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, get around online in those spaces.
Yes. Yes. Rocio, it was so good to have you here. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Mujer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a rating and review? Hitting that follow button and reviewing my show will allow other mommies like you find this podcast. Your review will also tell me if you enjoy the show, so I would truly appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget, please share this podcast con tus amigas. Also, make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Okay, mujer, thank you for joining y nos vemos in the next episode.